Let's get this over with. So if you've seen my review of Masterpiece Starscream earlier this year, which by the way, thanks, I appreciate it, then you'll remember I said I wanted to review the first 5 original Masterpiece figures this year. Yet, despite saying that, you'll have noticed that it's been months since then and I haven't reviewed another one. I did review other figures, yes, and of course the Smash video I did took quite a bit of time to make, but the main reason is because the next figure on that list is one I was honestly dreading covering. That being Masterpiece Mp-5 Megatron. This figure, to put it bluntly, is terrible. It's not good at all. Dare I say that this is the worst designed figure in the Masterpiece line, which actually makes sense considering this figure is known for being fully designed in just 12 days. 12 days. For reference, on average, the production of a toy from concept to final product takes around 1.5 to 2 years. So the fact that this figure's design was finalized in just under 2 weeks isn't exactly what I would call a good thing, even taking into account that I have very little knowledge of toy production. The end result is a figure that feels extremely unrefined compared to what came before it. And I haven't exactly been in a rush to talk about him as a result. But I can't keep avoiding this forever. Not only do I want to get to the other 2 MPs before the year's over, there are plenty of other things coming up in the future that I want to make videos on too. So let's get into Mp-5 and see just what it is about him that's so bad. Now, something I want to make clear before we get started is that for as bad as I think Mp-5 is, like all my reviews, I am trying to give constructive criticism regarding what was done well and what was done poorly. None of my frustration is meant to be an attack at the people who made this figure, which I know for a lot of you that goes without saying, but I think it is important to say sometimes. It's very easy to forget that there are real people who make these things, and they shouldn't be mocked, harassed, or have their entire output defined by a single thing they made that was bad. That last part is pretty noticeable here, as Mp-5 was designed by Hisashi Yuki, who's been with Takara since 1992. Some of the figures he's designed have had a mixed reception, like Legacy Prime RC, but he's also made highly regarded figures like the original Lio and Big Convoys, the original Omega Prime, 2010 Lugnut, 2010 High Moon Studios Optimus Prime, the Studio Series 86 Seekers, and every HasLab project post-Unicron. And for as much as I'm going to bitch in this video, that design prowess really shines in the alternate mode. Much like Starscream before him, Megatron seems to have been designed with the goal of being as accurate to the real-life Walther P-38 as possible, and for the most part has succeeded with flying colors. Comparing this to what pictures I could find online, every detail matches up, with the sole exception of the P-38 engraving, likely moved for the sake of the Decepticon logo and not clogging the chest with more stuff than needed. Also, like Starscream, I should point out that my copy of Mp-5 is used, so I'm going to go easy on the clear paint chipping. Obviously it isn't good, but given the circumstances, I feel it's fair to give it a bit of a pass here, and I will say that in the spots that aren't chipped, the silver paint does look very nice. I won't be as kind though of how the 2 halves won't fully tab together. This is an overall sturdy alt mode, it's not going to be coming apart unless you want it to, but for some reason it just won't fully snap in place. Minor stuff, but it's still worth mentioning. We also sadly don't get the extended stock and silencer, which on one hand I get, they aren't really necessary, but on the other hand, given just how much you sacrifice the transformation and robot mode for the gun mode, and trust me, we'll get into it, but those 2 modes suffer a lot, the fact that we don't get them is both frustrating and disappointing. At least the scope has a hidden light up feature, that's pretty cool. The light's not particularly bright, but that might just be due to the age of this thing. Also, is it just me or does the scope seem overly large? I know the gun mode on the whole is oversized in order for the robot mode to scale with MP1, but something about this scope feels bigger than it should be. Maybe it's just a me thing, I don't know. The trigger is also spring-loaded, and despite its size, the gun is fairly comfortable to hold. So on the whole, this gun mode is really good. While it may lack some parts to complete the traditional look of a Megatron gun mode, it still succeeds at being a very accurate representation of the real-life firearm. Perhaps a bit too accurate. To quickly summarize, Australia has much stricter laws regarding toy guns than those of the US or Canada, resulting in them seizing MP5 orders as a replica gun and therefore a restricted import. This resulted in buyers needing to gain a gun license just to own him. So hey, if you ever hear someone complain about Megatron not being a gun anymore, just tell them this story and see if that gets through to them on why we get him as tanks or helicopters nowadays. But as I said, the gun mode is good. It's also sadly the only part of this figure I consider good. Yep, it's all downhill from here, folks. So let's not waste any time and get to the transformation. Similarly to Optimus, Masterpiece Megatron's transformation is an expanded version of the one used on the original toy. Unfortunately, while the original Optimus's transformation is a pretty good base to work from, Megatron's is not, and it shows. Let's start things off simply by removing the scope and then untabbing the top half from the bottom. Focusing on the legs, let's split the handle in two and have it hinged out like so. Now connect this part into the hip, it'll click into place, untab the side skirts, and don't be surprised if they end up popping off. They're attached by a ball joint, so it's easy enough to reattach them, although they're also so big they tend to get in the way, so maybe it's better to leave them off until you're done. Yes, it's parts forming, which especially here I'm not a fan of, but if it makes this transformation more bearable, then it might just be worth stomaching. Now in the inner shins, there is a button, which is more for getting Megatron into gun mode, but when you pull the shins down, this part of the sliding rail should be right next to it when you're done. Then you want to hinge the knee joint into proper position and fold this cover down. Fold the side chunks on top of the shins. They're meant to tab in here, but it doesn't actually hold. Fantastic. Flip this part up and around. Oh look, it doesn't have a spot to tab in. How fun! Now open up this panel, bring the feet out, rotate them around, and open the feet up so they look like so. Don't worry, we will talk about why the feet look like this later. Now you can finally bring the halves of the trigger down onto the shins. They don't tab in, but the joint is solid, so they'll stay in place. Rotate the hips down so that the tab in the waist area is pointing up, and that's the legs done. For the top half, let's bring these out and fold them down, open these up, and fold this up. This will allow us to fold the top down and tab it into the waist tab I mentioned. Let's now fold these parts in and rotate them, then move them forward on this sliding rail. Detach the back of the gun, then push down from this spot here so that we can bring the chest up and reveal the lower torso. Rotate the torso around, untab the barrel of the gun, and rotate it back and into place. Again, no spot to tab it in. Nice. And our nightmare is almost over. Untab the head from the arms and bring it down, then untab the arms themselves. You'll want to hinge the shoulder out slightly from the joint, but like the hip skirts, the shoulder parts tend to pop off. So if you want, just leave them off, move the joint, and then pop them back on once you're done with it. Then you need to pull the shoulder up like so, that way it can rotate. You can also now extend the arms out. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to bring up once we're done the transformation sequence is how some of the parts on MP5 are pretty brittle and they can break if you're not careful. And as I was recording the transformation sequence, this part on the back broke off. It fell off. I don't know what I did exactly, but it's just fallen off and I have no idea how to get it back on. So just keep that in mind. You know, I'm not making up that part about it being brittle because, yeah, this has fallen off and now I can't complete the transformation back to gun mode. I can finish up the robot mode just fine, but yeah, I can't get this into a complete gun mode now because this has fallen off. So just, you know, lovely, lovely, lovely. Just love to see it on a figure that would have cost like $100-something when it first released. Absolutely lovely. Now we can take this mess and bring it upwards and in via another sliding rail. Now you just need to tab everything into place. You'll want to push up to tab the shoulders in. You should hear it click into place once you've got it, and the back section will then follow suit. Now we've got the classic fold-out panel for the hands. If you haven't already, you can put the shoulder and side skirt pieces back on, alongside the fusion cannon. And finally, the head gets tabbed in and brought out, and we are finally done. So this transformation sucks. This has been called the most complicated transformation of its time, and I can definitely see why. But the complexity here isn't really the problem I have. It's the lack of proper tabbing and clearance. So many parts don't actually tab in anywhere, leading to loose parts just getting in the way of what you're doing. Not helped by the fact that some of these chunks are huge. Like, we couldn't find a way to break this up so it could fit more naturally, just gonna leave us with these giant bits of kibble. Not to mention some of the thin clips used on the figure are known to suffer from breakage. And the metal frame used to connect the two halves of the robot, as well as the one used for the arms and head, really don't help. Look, I get it, you're taking cues from the original G1 toy, but G1 Megatron was a much simpler beast. It didn't have to worry about accurately scaling to other toys, trying to get more realistic proportions, not to say this does that well, but more on that in a minute, or having more robust articulation. This figure does, and with the way the frame is done here only hurts this figure in the long run. To put it simply, this figure was designed in 12 days, and the transformation makes that abundantly clear. If I could summarize this robot mode in just one word, woof. Proportionately, this guy is a mess. You have these ridiculously thin legs, both in the thighs and especially the shins, not helped by the crotch piece being so small it makes the legs look even longer than they are. It's like what people were complaining about with Earthrise Optimus, but even worse. The chest is alright, feels a little broader than I'd like, but it's honestly not that bad. But that falls apart when you look at it alongside everything else because said broadness in the chest results in the arms looking spindly. It's not as bad as the legs, but they are still way too thin. We still have these giant chunks of the gun mode that just awkwardly sit on the legs, not helping the looks of this figure at all. I will say I do enjoy the silver paint on the inside of the side skirts. It's a really nice bit that brings that detail in there out. However, I think these still would have been a lot better had they been a bit smaller and attached to something more secure than the ball joints being used. And the feet... oh, f*** me, the feet. So, unlike most Masterpiece figures, Mp-5 has very little die-cast metal. It's only the metal frames we saw during the transformation and here at the feet. But it appears they haven't properly made sure these would last since, as you can see, said metal has rusted over. Fan-f***ing-tastic. The back section isn't much better with the shins being hollow. Why didn't you try to have this filled in? You have this part here just sitting there. Why not use it in any way? These parts also don't tab in and just sit here. And as I said during the transformation, the barrel also just sits there, hoping the hinge it's on doesn't get loose and start flailing around. Same with this part the head sits on for the gun mode. Doesn't tab in anywhere and relies solely on the hinge joint to keep it in place. The only part of the robot mode I think works with no issues is the head sculpt. It might not be the best, the gap between the helmet and the face feels a bit wider than I'd like, but it's by no means terrible. But a decent head sculpt doesn't save a figure that looks bad everywhere else. Put this guy next to something like the SS86 Megatron and you can immediately see just how off this figure is. But okay, we've established the robot mode looks bad. What about the accessories? Well, those are actually quite good. You get the gun and sword he used in the movie, the mace from episode 1 that was apparently reused for HasLab Deathsaurus, so that's neat, and a Kremzik that was originally released with the Kiss Player brand of alternators. These are all nicely done, the paint and sculpting is good all around, and the weapons tab into the hands fairly securely, though that's more so with the gun than the mace and the sword. So yeah, the accessories are rather nice, but they can't save us from this show because Mp-5, simply put, doesn't have the articulation to make the most of them. Not only does he barely have any range moving the arms outwards, not only does the sculpt of the forearm block the elbow joint from bending, but there's no bicep swivel whatsoever. What? Why is that not here? That's such a basic bit of articulation and you didn't put it in on a Masterpiece figure? Unsurprisingly, the waist has nothing given all the parts that need to tab in around there. Meanwhile, the legs, like the arms, don't have the best outward movement, but the double-jointed knees are nice, as are the ball-jointed ankles. But even then, the hips are pretty loose, and while it is possible to get him into a pose, he doesn't look very good in anything really dynamic thanks to the poor proportions. It's why I haven't really posed him in anything beyond a neutral standing pose. And that's without getting into how the right arm struggles to hold up the fusion cannon due to the weight. And for those who are saying this is simply a product of its time, no! This figure came out in 2007. You know, the same year that had the release of the first Bay movie and its toy line, or the animated line. Oh, and alternators and classics were still going on, and typically those figures had much better articulation than this guy, who at the time would have been around $100. Simply put, Mp-5 just isn't fun to pose, and when you combine that with the poor look of the figure, the accessories can't save what is simply a bad robot mode. Mp-5 is suitably big to match with Mp-1 at around 30.5 centimeters. Essentially anything Prime can scale with, so can he, so I suppose you could put him with your alternator figures if you want. Though, if you really are thinking of getting this figure, I'd suggest just leaving him in gun mode. Writing the script for this figure was harder than I thought it would be. And that isn't because finding its faults was hard, it's because its faults are so obvious that it was hard to just not make a video of me pointing at the figure and going, yeah, that. Outside the gun mode, there is no reason to pick up Mp-5 at all. With an awful transformation in both a bad-looking and bad-posing robot mode, Mp-5 is the first proper terrible Masterpiece figure. What else is there to say but repeat what I said earlier? It was designed in 12 days, and boy, does it show. But with all that being said, we're at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Later.